is shaykh to Moshe Rabbeinu. We asked based on Pshat in the Pasuk that it says V'yichoi lecha, should bring to you. The paraduma should come to Moshe Rabbeinu. And that seems why dafka Moshe Rabbeinu? Now Rashi says that the reason it says V'yichoi lecha is because all of the paras are nikros al shem Moshe. All of the paras are called on the name of Moshe Rabbeinu. So again, what's the connection of Moshe Rabbeinu to the paras? Because after all, the only one that Moshe had any direct involvement with was the first. There were 10 paras, there were 9. There will be a 10th. As Hashem tekefu miyad. There were 9 paras adumos, and they were done in the Beis Hamikdash, and the first one was done in the Midbar, and the rest were done in the Beis Hamikdash, and Moshe Rabbeinu only had to do with the first one. So why is it that all of them are called Al Shem Moshe? That was our first basic question. The second question the Rebbe asked, that the name of something is relative to the essence of it and its content, as we learn in Shayachid V'Emunah. We spent some time talking about that. That means there's some very, very deep intrinsic connection between Paraduma and Moshe Rabbeinu. And what is that? That's the second level of the same question. The third level of the same question was, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't even sacrifice the sacrifice. Moshe Rabbeinu gave it to Elazar HaKohen, and Elazar HaKohen is the one who sacrificed the sacrifice. Right? So too, the Rebbe said in the footnote 6 that we saw yesterday, so too Mashiach. Mashiach isn't a Kohen, Mashiach's Shevet Yehuda. So he must just command the idea of Paraduma. So why is Paraduma so powerfully connected to Moshe? That's the Rebbe's basic question. Relative to the union of Tzivui, what Tzivui is, we talked about this yesterday a little bit, and the Sinus Koyach, and empowerment, the fact that the Eibishter gives us commands to do certain things, gives us the ability to elevate that physical object from a state of physicality to a state of holiness. That's where the Sinus Koyach comes from. And if the Eibishter didn't command us to do that, or if we do that action in a time when it's not necessarily relevant to the mitzvah, if you take a lulav and an esrog now and shake it, you would be doing nothing to that physical object. You'd just be wasting your time. Whereas if there's a command of the Eibishter to say, shake that object on the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th of Tishrei, so then by doing that, you are given the ability to by the Eibishter, through that mitzvah, the ability to elevate that object to a state of kedusha, to a state of holiness. It's an amazing thing. That's what a mitzvah is. Right? So too, the Rebbe says, relative to Moshe, relative to Melech HaMashiach gives the koyach to the Yidden to bring paraduma. Moshe Rabbeinu is the source of the koyach of paraduma. Why? Why that powerful connection of paraduma to Moshe, and vice versa? Okay. Ve'inyanu. The Rebbe's going to give 2 answers to the question. First one we're going to see, based on an introduction that is relevant to both answers, and then the second answer, which will be the whole mind. Today we'll see the first answer. We might even get into the second answer. Who knows? But both answers are based on the next paragraph, explaining the uniqueness of the mitzvah of paraduma. Va'inyanu, the Isa B'Lekutei Torah, it says in Lekutei Torah, the Alter Rebbe, in Parshas Chukas, that time al zeh, the reason, sheparaduma nemar, that by paraduma it says, Zos Chukas Torah, this is the chayk of the Torah, and yesterday we mentioned the question. Where else does it talk about Chukas? Mentioned it yesterday? Beautiful. In Parshas Matos it says Zos Chukas Torah, and Rashi says that that's talking about the paraduma. Well done. There's one other place. Zos Chukas Pasach says it by Pesach, Korban Pesach. So why doesn't it say here Zos Chukas Para? Right? This is the chayk of paraduma. Paraduma is the paradigm of chayk, the prototypical chayk. What's a chayk? Something which you and I can't understand. We're going to understand much more deeply what a chayk is. Right? The simplest superficial and very lacking explanation of a chayik is it's something that, I mean, this is true. It doesn't resonate in human intellect. Okay. As opposed to a mishpat, which is one of the mitzvahs in the Torah, which does resonate in human intellect. Don't murder, right? That makes sense. Right? Don't eat milk and meat. That doesn't make sense. And maybe someone will figure out some way, etc., of telling me that, in a laboratory they figured out how milk and meat make sense not to eat together, blah, 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 blah. But I find those things very, very hard to understand because there's 8 billion people in the world that are allowed to eat milk and meat. It's a very small group of people who aren't. So don't tell me it's kashmis. Don't tell me it's physical. Because if it was physical, then everybody would decide that it's probably not a good idea. Right? It's not with physicality at all. And it doesn't even resonate in physicality, meaning you can't figure it out in a laboratory. Right? Don't murder, you don't need a laboratory, you just need common sense. Don't steal, you don't need a laboratory, you just need common sense. Other things, okay, maybe you'll figure it out in the laboratory. But there are mitzvahs that resonate in intellect. Don't mix wool and linen, exactly the same thing. So there'll be people who say, well, they've done interesting experiments about wool and linen, blah, 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 blah. Okay, but there's 8 billion people who can wear wool and linen and it's not a problem. You don't see that they're all dropping dead from wearing wool and linen. Interesting enough, the prototypical mishpatim are shaykh to them also. Don't murder, don't steal. Those are shaykh mitzvahs v'nei nerech. That's shaykh to 8 billion people. Equally. And as the Rambam says, comes from Matan Torah. Right? It's not just like an idea. The Lubavitch Rebbe thought up, let's talk about Sheva mitzvahs v'nei nerech. The Rebbe says the non-Jews of the world are commanded from Matan Torah, the 7 mitzvahs v'nei nerech. Now, they're also mentioned before Matan Torah. That's why they're called the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach, because they were already given in the time of Noach. That being said, the Rambam says the shorish of them is from Matan Torah. So maybe they should also eat cheesecake on Shavuos or something. The Tamal Zeh Shebapara Aduma Nemar Zos Chukas HaTorah. Why is it Zos Chukas HaTorah? Who? Lefisha mitzvahs paraduma in klolos HaTorah. Mitzvahs paraduma is some general idea that relates to the Torah as a whole. Evidently more than anything else. V'lochin, therefore, Kemei Torah nikras al shmei shel Moshe. It's the first answer the Rebbe is giving. Again, this answer is the basis of both answers. Because we're going to say the Torah is shaykh to Moshe. Paraduma is the klal of the Torah, so paraduma is shaykh to Moshe. Okay, so we still have to understand why. And there'll be 2 different explanations as to why. Lochen kemei Torah nikras al shmei, just like the Torah is called on the name shel Moshe. Torah is Moshe. Moshe calls it Zikra Torah is Moshe Avdi. Remember the Torah made my servant. Torah is Moshe. Kach gam paraduma, so to paraduma, because paraduma somehow encapsulates the whole Torah in one mitzvah. We'll see why. What's unique about it? She klolos Torah nikras al shmei shel Moshe. Therefore, it's called on the name of Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, so that's a very simple, straightforward answer in pshat. Obviously, we have to understand that more deeply. At first glance, one could add. What does it mean? Paraduma is klolos Torah. Tamash, because of Melukat Hei, that which the Alter Rebbe writes in Melukat Hei. Shemitz is paraduma, klolos Torah. That the mitzvah paraduma is the general reality of Torah. Kavana hi. The intention is beikar lemitzvah Torah. When we say Torah, so that can mean one of 2 things. Limud Torah or mitzvah Torah. Now, in general, it means both. Okay, but you can also focus on one as opposed to the other. There's a reality called Limud Torah, learning Torah, and there's a reality called the Siyas Mitzvahs, and those are 2 completely different expressions of Avodah. Torah is all about milamayla lamata, from above below. Mitzvahs are all about milamata lamayla, from below above. Mitzvahs are all about dealing with Gashmias. Torah is all about, obviously, you might be talking about things happening in the physical world, depends on what aspect of Torah you're learning. Right? So if you're sitting and learning a page of Gemara, you might be talking about an ox goring a cow, or you might be talking about what bracha you make on an apple. That's true. But ultimately, that's all an imposition of godly wisdom from above below. Mitzvahs, it's all about dealing with physicality directly. Most mitzvahs. We'll see there's certain mitzvahs that aren't, which is interesting. Right? Paraduma is interesting enough, one of them, or the prototype of them. Right? Okay. Even though paraduma is very physical, but we'll see what I mean. Meaning, when we say paraduma is the klal of the Torah, I mean paraduma is the klal, is the most powerful expression of the notion of mitzvah ad kedei kach that it somehow encompasses in itself all of the mitzvahs in the Torah. How? Well, let's see. Hakavani be'ikar lemitzvah satara kamuvan mi'abir be'Likutei Torah sham, as is explained in Likutei Torah there, the Alter Rebbe. The zesh and mitzvahs paraduma. The Rebbe is explained in 2 lines. The zesh and mitzvahs paraduma who klolas Torah. That which paraduma is the general reality of Torah. Who ki yesod kol mitzvahs who ritzoi v'shev. The foundation of all mitzvahs is the avodah of ritzoi v'shev. Ritzoi v'shuv, some people say ritzoi v'shev. I think the pasuk says shev. Ritzoi v'shev. What's ritzoi? Go up, shev, come back. Enter into a transcendent state, elevate yourself from below above, and then shev, come back. Come back into Olam Hazeh. Tanya recently, the Alter Rebbe emphasized the union of shev 3 days ago. That the ikr is to be in Olam Hazeh. Not of an aviu. What was not of an aviu? Was their problem? All ritzoi without shev. Right? Unbelievable spiritual transcendence. Right? They elevated themselves up to an incredible level, so they experienced godly revelation, but it was so powerful that they couldn't come back. They died. Right? Moshe Rabbeinu said to Aaron, his brother, about the death of his 2 sons, the passing of his 2 sons, that they fulfilled the pasuk, but Kroi HaKadosh, and those close to me I'll be sanctified. Meaning that they did something terribly wrong. Right? But not like what you and I do when we do things that are wrong. A slightly different level of wrong. Terrible mistakes, spiritual. But they reached an unbelievably lofty level of spiritual attainment. That's Ritzay. And Shev. Some mitzvahs have an expression of Ritzay. Some mitzvahs, most mitzvahs, have an expression of Shev. For instance, Kriya Shema. It's Ritzay. What's Kriya Shema? Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Ein od milvado. There's nothing else. There's only God. Shema Yisrael. But what does Chazal say? Kol HaKereh Kriya Shema b'lei tefillin. Anybody who reads Kriya Shema without tefillin, obviously we're talking about the day and not the night. Anybody who reads Kriya Shema without tefillin, ki ilu makriv oila bli mincha v'zevach bli nesochim. I believe that's the lashon. Right? It's like they sacrificed a korban oila without a korban mincha, and they sacrificed another type of korban without nesochim. What's nesochim are the libations. No one knows what libations are, but that's the English translation. Right? What are libations? Wine poured onto the mizbeach that went down a hole and entered into the depths, ultimately to flow out of the base of Mikdash. Okay, so what's Kriya Shema? Kriya Shema is Ritzay. Elevating yourself beyond physical reality. What's tefillin? Shave. Wrapping a cowl around your arm and your head. Right? Bringing it down into Gashmius Mamish. What's the oila? Elevating the animal up. What's the mincha? Down. What's the zevach, any korban? Elevating it up. What's nesochim? Pushing it, bringing it back down. So, doing one without the other is improper. Too much shave, too much elam hazeh. Person gets stuck in the dark. Very often, what?
How was the mincha lecture?
The mincha's shave. Bring it down. With the flour, taking flour, because a meal offering. Sometimes, when people get a little too into Elam Hazeh, So teaching Lubavitch girls, you don't hear it as much in Balei Tshuva because they don't quote the Rebbe as much. They don't blame the Rebbe for their spiritual problems as much. The Rebbe is the solution for their spiritual thing, the difficulties, as opposed to the source of it. So not the Rebbe's deserve, but they'll say so. They don't mean to say so, but they say so. When you start to challenge them a little bit about not being into Gashmias as much as they might want to say, yeah, but the Rebbe wants us to be in the world. Which world? The world the Goyim made, or the world that the Eibishter made? Which world is the Rebbe? That means, I'm not saying the Rebbe's God, but if the Rebbe wants you to be there, that means that's because God wants you to be there, because the Rebbe's only telling us what the Eibishter wants. Right? Okay. So when the Rebbe says this is what you should be focusing on, why is he saying that? Because the Eibishter wants us to be focusing on what part of the world? Right? Okay. So we have to be careful not to be too involved in the shoiv of it. We also have to be careful not to be too involved in the ritzay of it. Right? There has to be a balance. Right? Yes, there should be times of tremendous spiritual upliftedness, 100%. Say Kriya Shema twice a day. Right? Learn Torah all day if you're sitting in yeshiva. So, but there also has to be an idea of bringing that down into expression in Olam Hazeh, in Gashmias. That's ritzay v'shoiv. Paraduma is the ultimate expression of that. It contains both of them. Most mitzvahs are one or the other, mostly shoiv. Right? What's paraduma? Both. What's the ritzay of paraduma? Burning the animal completely and turning it into ash. Right? What's the aish of it all? What's the shave of it all? Using the ash. Now we're using it and sprinkling it down here. So there's the fire of it all, burning it all up, but actually dealing with what's left down here in order to bring about the Torah, in order to bring about the purities. What do? You burn the paraduma and then use the ash to sprinkle on the person who's become defiled by contact with death. Tamei Mace. Okay. So paraduma is the ultimate expression, and that's what the Alter Rebbe explains, the ultimate expression of ritzay v'shoiv. So it contains both. So in that sense, it's klolos a Torah, which means klolos a mitzvahs. That's paraduma. Okay. Val pizeh klolos a mitzvah, klolos mitzvahs a Torah shayachas l'Moshe. And since Moshe is Torah, and paraduma is the klal of the Torah, which aspect of the Torah? Dafka mitzvah is the Torah. So then, paraduma is shayach to Moshe. Okay, we've got the equation. We don't understand the equation, but we've got the equation. Now the Rebbe is going to explain this equation twice. First, very briefly, the next paragraph, and then for the whole rest of the Maimon. The first explanation will be that Moshe is the source of Mesiras Nefesh, which is necessary for the performance of mitzvahs. And then the whole rest of the Maimon is Moshe is the source of Kabbalah Soul, which is the necessity for all mitzvahs. Now, Mesiras Nefesh, interesting enough, we'll see, is ultimately a preparation for the mitzvah. Right? How do I prepare myself to do a mitzvah properly? Bring myself to a state of Mesiras Nefesh. Well, we'll talk about it. We'll see it in the next paragraph. Whereas Kabbalah Soul is the etzem of the mitzvah itself, okay? Which is probably why the whole mind is based on the second answer as opposed to the first. Okay, we can explain this based on that which is written in Tanya. Right? So far, the Alter Rebbe is guiding us through everything. Melukat Hei, Tanya. Now, if you look in footnote 12, it says Melukat Hei in Tanya. Melukat Hei in Tanya. Remember this. Write it down. Right? Write it on your arm in a way in which it can be erased. Right? Okay. Melukat Hei in Tanya is the parak of Mesiras Nefesh. It's the end of 8 prakim, starting with parak Yud Ches, where the Rebbe explains the Indian of how to become a Beinoni. Having explained in the first 12 chapters the Indian of the reality of the Nefesh Elokis, the reality of Nefesh Bahamis, etc., and how the Ikar Vayda is to be a Beinoni. So in chapter 18, the Rebbe starts talking about, so how does one become a Beinoni? 18 to 25. Those 8 chapters. Or the avodah to become a... Now, Rebbe talks about different avenues to reach that state later. But that's the beginning of the discussion. And the end of that discussion is Melukat Hei, which is the parak of Mesiras Nefesh. And the centrality of Mesiras Nefesh in Avodas Hashem. Self-sacrifice. The Tam al zeh shetziva Moshe Rabbeinu l'dor shenichnasu la'aretz likros kriyishma pamayim b'chol yom. That the reason that Moshe Rabbeinu the Alter Rebbe, Tanya. Reason that Moshe Rabbeinu, we'll see later the very fascinating, deeper understanding of the line we're about to read now in footnote 16. We'll see it, but we'll just read it now and explain it simply. The reason that Moshe commanded the generation that entered into Eretz Yisrael that they should say Kriya Shema twice a day, because Kriya Shema, of course, is written in Devarim, and Devarim was said in the 40th year, and that means Moshe Rabbeinu was commanding this was teaching this to the people who were about to the Dor Sheni, the second generation, who were about to enter into Eretz Yisrael. That itself is an interesting question. We'll see in footnote 16 an incredible diuk of the Rebbe and the language of the Alter Rebbe and helping us understand this idea in general, but just now we'll see it simply. Why? This is the Lashon of the Alter Rebbe. L'kabel malchus shemayim b'mesiras nefesh. They should accept upon themselves the kingship of heaven b'mesiras nefesh. Shema Yisrael, Shem Elokeinu, Shem Echad. V'ahavta es v'alokech b'chol levav v'nafsh b'chol meyodecho b'chol nafshecho afilu netel es nafshecho. Even if he takes your life. Mesiras nefesh. Kriya Shema is mesiras nefesh. Unfortunately, the history of our people includes countless tens and hundreds of millions of Jews over history who died with Kriya Shema on their lips, in the state of Mesiras Nefesh. That's Kriya Shema. So for whatever reason, Moshe Rabbeinu decided that now's the time to focus on Mesiras Nefesh and to teach this generation something about Mesiras Nefesh. So he taught them Kriya Shema. I'm sorry. Even though even though he had promised them in Parshas Eikev that your fear and your dread will be upon all these people. In other words, what's the Rebbe explaining in the parentheses? Even though. What's even though? What's the even though of it?
Even though they accept the kingship of Shemayim through Mesiras Nefesh.
Okay. Even though isn't on that, even though is on the fact that even though Moshe promised them that all of the nations in Canaan will be afraid of them. Okay, so what might you think the Mesiras Nefesh is necessary for? What are they about to do? Go conquer a land. So what might the Mesiras Nefesh be expressed in? War. Soldier. Aza. It's called Mesiras Nefesh. Is that the Mesiras Nefesh that Moshe is talking about? Clearly not. Why not? What? Okay, so what's the even though? Why is that an even though? Why can't it be the war?
Hashem promised that he would.
Good. Told them you're not be afraid of them. You're just going to look at them and they're going to faint. You're going to win, no problem. Oh, so the Mesiras Nefesh is not going out to war with the understanding that sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. No. That's not Mesiras Nefesh. How do you know? The Rebbe promised them. Moshe Rabbeinu promised them and said, "Don't worry about the war. Not here. Not when he taught them Kriya Shema. Parshas Eikev. Kriya Shema is Veschonen. The second half of Kriya Shema is Parshas Eikev. We're at the second paragraph. Where's the third paragraph of Kriya Shema? Judaism 101. 3 chapters of Kriyat Shema. We have Shema.
This is it.
Right.
How about this is it?
Okay, good. Yes, it says tzitzis in it. It certainly does. That's true. You've got me there. Can't fight that one. You win. Good idea. Okay, good idea. Where is that? Where is Parshat Tzitzis? And this is going to be very important for us. What? It's been Bamidbar. Okay, Bamidbar is a pretty long. Yeah, what? Okay, what's how you're fair? We're getting close. The chapters were done. I'm not picking on you. I'm just saying, you're right, chapter. But generally, Jews talk about parshas because the chapters were done by monks. Right? That doesn't mean we don't use them. Everybody uses them, right? Right? No, you're right. Okay, so what's in chapter 14 in Bamidbar? What?
15.
15. Okay, say the Parsha Shlach, the end of Parsha Shlach, after the story of the Meraglim. Right? After the story of Meraglim is Parshas Tzitzis in the Chumash. Okay. Now I know we didn't get there in Rabbi Vichnan's question sheets yet, so I can't pick on you, right? Like Bereshis Bar Elokim. Where's that? Okay, so it's Parsha Shlach. That was not to pick on you. That was just that hopefully now you'll remember. Okay, I would assume all those theatrics will help you remember. I hope. Right. Oh, so the Rebbe says that even though you were promised that they're going to be afraid of you and therefore, obviously going to war is going to be a difficult thing and there's going to be a certain aspect of Mesiras Nefesh. That's not the Mesiras Nefesh Moshe Rabbeinu was talking about. Right. If anything, the Mesiras Nefesh of the Yidden was going to war and having to kill people, and killing people in those days didn't mean you drop a bomb on them or you shoot a shell from a tank, or even you shoot them at 50 meters. Killing people in those days meant you stuck a sword in them, which must have been rather difficult for people who had just spent much of their life learning Torah with Moshe Rabbeinu in the desert. That was somewhat antithetical to everything they had spent their life doing. Eating man, learning Torah, right? Seeing all the miracles of the desert their whole life, right? That's who these people were, right? They were the youngsters. Some of them had been in Mitzrayim as teenagers or kids. Most of them not. That Mesiras Nefesh is really quite astounding, but that Mesiras Nefesh is Mesiras Nefesh for Yiddishkeit, not Mesiras Nefesh to save your life. That's Mesiras Nefesh to do something that the Eibishter wants you to do, even though it's completely antithetical to who you are. Which is astounding that they did that. They were able to do that. And even from afar, it's not so easy. My Chavrusin in Yeshiva. Before he came to the Yeshiva where he and I learned together, we learned Smicha together. So he did the Chesder here, where you go to Yeshiva and go to the army. So he was a tankist. And in 1982, so he was in Beirut. And he told one amazing story that things were a little quiet. They were in what was called the Hippodrome, Beirut. There were 4 tanks. In the tanks, they're all from guys, so there was enough for a minions. I hadn't done a minion for a while, so they, on the radio in the tank, they said, look, why don't we jump outside for Shemona Esrei and say Chazaras and Shots, we'll daven in the tank, we'll jump and say Shemona. Fine. So it had been quiet for hours and hours and hours, so they figured, okay. So they put on the flak jackets, etc. We're davening, and then, they gave them, they all jumped out of the tank, and they davened Shemona Esrei. 30 seconds in the Shemona Esrei, they shot out like crazy and jumped back in the tank. Finished Shemona Esrei alone in the tank. That was his another one of his very, very. This was more powerful on him. They were driving down the street in Beirut, and he was the gunner. He was the guy looking at the thing and pulled the trigger on the tank. So he was looking, and there was a terrorist jumped out into the street, and he blew him away. He had nightmares for months. You ever kill a person? I know he's a mechaber, I know he's a terrorist. He's still a person. You ever kill a person? I never killed a person. Anybody here ever kill a person? He had nightmares for months. He killed the person. That's heavy. He's a doctor. He was not a doctor then. After yeshiva, he went to medical school. Just interesting. I don't know whether there's any connection. I never thought of it until just now. Who knows? Okay, so the Yidden, the mysterious nefesh of the Yidden was to go kill all those people. Not that they were afraid they might die. No, they had to kill them. Now, I understand that's war, right? The famous line in war, right? Patton. You go to war not to die for your country. I'm not going to say everything he said because he included certain words I won't repeat, right? He described the other guy in a certain way. He said the idea of going to war isn't to die for your country, it's to make the other guy die for his. That's certainly true. That's a pretty straightforward, heavy thing to say, right? I mean, that's true. Okay, so now for you and I, that's mysterious nefesh. If the Eibishter asked you and I to go kill someone right now, I think that would be real mysterious nefesh to go do that. Because that's not what I want. And mysterious nefesh simply is I have a certain desire and I have to overcome that desire in order to do what the Eibishter wants. I'm giving up my nefesh, I'm giving up my ratzon, my will. It's not only giving up my physical life, it's also giving up my conceptual reality. How I understand things, and define things, and experience things. Giving that over to the Eibishter, to define them and experience them in terms of what the Eibishter wants. That's real mysterious nefesh. Mysterious nefesh isn't just I'm ready to die for the Eibishter, I'm ready to live for the Eibishter. It's also mysterious nefesh. So Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to give the Yidden that level of mysterious nefesh. Because, I'll read that more slowly, I'm sorry. The fulfillment of Torah and mitzvahs, Talu, is dependent b'zechiras inyan of mysterious nefesh, remembering the idea of mysterious nefesh. Why? Well, let's see. So that's what the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya. Now we have to understand that. The whole paragraph is going to help us understand. That Meisha specifically, now that dafka can be on one of two things. Meisha specifically, which it seems to be because the dafka is here, as opposed to dafka to the dor shenichtasu la'aretz. Because what about the generation before? Right? It's a whole interesting question about the timing of Kriya Shema, which we'll see soon. Shemesha dafka, but it seems the emphasis of dafka is clearly on Moshe. That Moshe dafka tziva zel l'dor shenichtasu la'aretz. Who? Why is this something? Now, obviously, Moshe. Who else is going to say it? But the Rebbe obviously wants us to understand that there's something very powerfully connected to Moshe in this notion of Mesiras Nefesh. And that's why it's not just one of the mitzvahs in the Torah that we got from the Eibishter, it's something that Moshe commanded, and again, I'll say it now because otherwise we just won't understand it. We'll see it in footnote 16, the Rebbe is going to make a diuk of the whole thing, but in general, did we say Kriya Shema through the 40 years of the desert? Didn't we? I mean, simple pshat, no. I mean, we heard it in the 40th year, right? Simple pshat. All right, okay. Did we wear tefillin 40 years in the desert? And the first commandment of tefillin is before we leave Mitzrayim. The first two parshas are in Parshas Bay. We haven't even left Mitzrayim, and there's four parshas in tefillin. Two from Parshas Bay, right? Which before we left Mitzrayim, we're already commanded to put on tefillin. And the last two are Devarim, Shema and Vayim Shemaya. Creation. So did we put on tefillin? We didn't put. There's a whole interesting deal amongst, we share him for everybody. If we had tefillin, what about 2 boxes? 4 boxes. Totafot is 4, right? Rashi, Chumash. Right? Tat is 2 and Pat is 2. In Afriki. Absolute clear proof that Kriya Shema existed before the 40th year. What's that clear proof?
Because we fall.
It doesn't. That's not clear. That's not clear. Don't have any pictures of anybody wearing 4 boxes of tefillin from the midbar. I mean, we have some old black and white, but they're really hard to see. But there is it's very interesting. I don't expect you to think of it, but it's a fascinating one. Once you hear it, you go, oh yeah, that really is amazing. Okay. Remember a guy named Korach? Mm-hmm. Yeah, Korach, unfortunately, Shevet Levi, right? So Korach was a brilliant guy, but he made a pretty serious mistake. When did Korach happen? Historically, when was Korach? Right after the Meraglim. Right after the Meraglim, spies. Right after the spies. Next parsha, Shlach, then Korach. But that's how it happened chronologically. Right after we were told, we're not going into Eretz Yisrael for 40 years, Korach said, whoa. Korach started shepherding. Korach asked some interesting questions. What were some of the interesting questions Korach asked? Cheles on tzitzis. Okay, that's a pretty reasonable question for him to ask, because what did we just learn? When did we hear the mitzvah of tzitzis?
Just then.
Parsha Shlach. Okay, when did Korach show up? Next day. Right? Oh, okay, so that makes sense. What else did Korach say? Oh, Bayis Molei Svarim. A house full of books, does it need a mezuzah? Where are we commanded to put on a mezuzah on our door? What? Where? Where's that commandment? Shema. What do you put in a mezuzah? Shema v'hayim shemeir. Interesting. Wait a minute. How did he ask that question? When did we hear about Kriya Shema? In simple pshat, when did we hear about Kriya Shema? 38 and a half years later. Right? Simple pshat in the whole thing. In the month of Shvat, 2488. Korach happened sometime after the month of Av in the year 2449, or it might have been the beginning of 2450, right? It's, because Tishrei happened. The Meraglim was Tisha B'Av. Isn't that interesting? Korach says, Bayis Malei Svarim. Does it need a mezuzah? So evidently they'd heard about a mezuzah. Where was there a mezuzah? In Krishma. Nowhere else. Nowhere else in the Torah does it mention a mezuzah. Yes, we put the blood on our mezuzah, but nowhere does it say that you have mitzvah to put a mezuzah on your door. So they must have, that's brought by Rishonim as a raya that they must have known about Krishma. So then the fact that Moshe taught them again in Devarim that takes upon a whole new understanding. It's in the Torah in Devarim. It's not written anywhere else. But they must have known about it, or else how could Korach say, what about a mezuzah? Mezuzah is Shema and V'hayim Shemaya, two parshas that Moshe taught us in Devarim. Amazing, no? It's amazing. Right? Okay. How they knew, where, Ichves. I assume Yaakov Avinu said Kriya Shema. There's a rather famous medrash that's brought in halachic svarim in order to help it. The Rambam brings it in order to help us understand why we say Baruch Shem Kved Malchus Eliyel Ved. What did Yaakov's children? Yaakov was talking to his children at the end of his life, and he was very worried that they wouldn't keep going the way that they have to go. And what did they say to him? Shema Yisrael. Yisrael, Yaakov, Yisrael. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Don't worry. And what did Yaakov say in response to them? Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Eliyel V'Oy. That's a long time ago. Right? Okay. So it's out there. They made it up. They all said it every day. I assume Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov were Mekayim Kol HaTorah Kula. I assume they said Kriya Shema every day. Okay, but somehow Kriya Shema, and that's what strengthens the question that the Alter Rebbe is dealing with when it comes to Moshe Rabbeinu teaching Kriya Shema in to Dar Hasheni, to the people entering Eretz Yisrael. Why is it written in Devarim as if Moshe Rabbeinu is saying it? And in Kriya Shema Taka says, Moshe Rabbeinu is talking, "V'nasati eiseh b'sadcha." I gave you grass in your field. Moshe Rabbeinu gave us grass in our field. That's what it says, right? It's in Devarim, and it's Moshe talking. Right? Interesting enough, what does Moshe say in Kriya Shema? Fascinating. It's very hard to ask any questions in Kriya Shema because how could it be anything else? It's Kriya Shema. But he says, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokei Nu. Who's he including in there? Himself, right? When he repeats the Aseret Dibros, so in the Aseret Dibros it says, same thing, Hashem Elokei Cho. Right? Right after he says Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, he says V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha. You love your God. About by Kriya Shema, he includes himself. There's a beautiful Ramban there. You want to see the Ramban on Shema Yisrael? It's beautiful. Explaining. Rabbeinu includes himself at the Yidden. He says Shema Yisrael. So interesting. Right? Like why it should be Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeichem, or Elokecha, whichever. I mean it's singular. The next pasuk is singular. V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha, b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha. Right? It's all singular. You singular, and the next paragraph is plural. Right? But interesting, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu. When it comes to Yichud Hashem, the Moshe Rabbeinu includes himself with Am Yisrael. He doesn't want to be left out on that, so to speak. Okay, but somehow that's already out there because it's in a mezuzah, and Korach knows about a mezuzah. So then the idea of Moshe repeating this and this being put in the Torah as Moshe saying it to the door that's going into Eretz Yisrael is much more powerful. Yesh lem et zeh shemeshe dafka tziva zeh l'darash nichtus l'aretzu. Second line, ki mesiras nefesh hu in a bittul. What's mesiras nefesh? All about bittul. What's bittul? Moving yourself to the side and realizing that your life is about the Eibishter. It's not about you. And that's what allows a person to even give up their life physically. But again, we're not talking about physical Mesiras Nefesh in this point. We're talking about conceptual Mesiras Nefesh. Conceptual Mesiras Nefesh, the Frierdiker Rebbe explains. I mean, it's brought in Chassidus B'chlal, but the Frierdiker Rebbe is very much a home address for the idea of Mesiras Nefesh being Mesiras HaRatzon, giving up your will. What do you want? What do you want out of life? Well, what's the answer to that question? What does God want out of my life? God gave me life. He gives me life. He continues to give me life. What does he want? What does he want from that thing that I have called life? That's Mesiras Nefesh. If I live my life that way, that's called Mesiras Nefesh. Bittul. Bittul doesn't mean I'm drooling because I've had a lobotomy. Bittul means that my conscious reality is all about what the Eibishter wants and not about my own agenda. That's bittul. What's your agenda? The Eibishter's? And as a chassid, the Rebbe's, which we understand means the Eibishter's, because the Rebbe wants us to do what he understands the Eibishter wants us to do, and is simply the conduit to help us understand that. So what's the agenda? Bittul. The cave and Sha'ad the Mumetzias. Since a person is a Metzias, what does that mean? He's a Metzias. We're very, very powerfully conscious of our own existence. Metzias, existence, right? He's a Metzias. I am. Right? Hepech in a bittul, which is the opposite of bittul. What's bittul, so to speak? On the simplest level, what's bittul? I'm not, God is. Okay. What's our conscious experience? I am. God might also be. Do you want to have a philosophical discussion about whether or not God is? I might be very, very, very charitable and allow God to exist. That's so kind of me. Okay, why is that a possible scenario in the human reality? Because we're a Metzias, because we're very, very powerfully. The Eibishter gave us this experience, right? It's his fault, so to speak. Right? He gave us this incredibly powerful experience of self. Metzias, I am. Right? I am. I taste the food. I feel the wind. I experience the joy. I experience the pain. I experience you, and you experience me, and that life. I'm a Metzias. It's the opposite of it. Theoretically, I could experience Elokus in everything I experienced. Right? We learned about the Rashbi, right? The last mimer we learned before I went on my enjoyable holiday to Canada and the Rebbe,
Yeah.
which turned into something else, but that's okay. God runs the world, right? What did we learn? It's the Rashbi. What did the Rebbe tell us? Tarasu Nosei. What does that mean by the Rashbi? That the Rashbi's conscious reality was Elokus. The Rashbi lived Mashiach, basically. He lived Geula, right? The Rebbe, we talked about this when we learned it then, right? That the Rebbe explains that the B'yimei Mashiach will see Elokus as obvious and will see physical reality as a chiddush. We'll have to remind ourselves of the existence of physical reality. Just like today, there's godliness in physical reality, and we have to remind ourselves of godliness because we experience physical reality so powerfully. B'yimei Mashiach, we'll have to remind ourselves of the existence of physical reality because godliness will be so obvious to us. So we'll have to remind ourselves I can put the cup on the table and won't fall to the floor. First floor. Well, we're on the first floor. Whatever, 0.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Fine. I'll be able to put the cup on the table. But that'll be like, wow! Look at that. That's cool. Right? How's that happen? Because we'll see more the godliness of the cup than the physical reality of the cup, which unfortunately is no longer holding any coffee. Okay. That's Metzias. That's who we are. The cave in Shadam Metzias, the Rebbe says so simply, since we're Metzias, since we're so powerfully aware of our own existence, and not that that doesn't make us bad, terrible, horrible, and worthy of death. That's just existential reality. That's the way the Eibishter created us. Now, that's obviously only mitzad our nefesh b'hamis, that's only mitzad our animal soul. Okay, but that is our experience. And that's hepech in a bittul, and that's the opposite of bittul. Bittel's not a natural state for a human being. Right? Talk to your average 5-year-old. Right? He's bottled. Not bottled. Right? Promise him a pudding, he'll start dancing around like a dog. Right? So get so excited. Like a dog with his, milk bone. Why? It's 5. Hopefully at 25 you won't be that way when you offer him a beer. Right? If he is, okay, so he's a 5-year-old in a 25-year-old body. What are you going to do? Hey, it's out there. Right? Yeah, it's common. The guy whose teeth I brush, he sometimes like that. Right? It's common. When you say common, don't point to someone else. Right, all of us have that in us, right? Okay, so that's why. Well, the Eibishter created us that way. Okay. Lochein, therefore, since it's natural for us to be very powerfully aware of our own existence, which is the opposite of ultimately of where we're supposed to be or where we're challenged to be. Because we're challenged to be in a state of bittul, which is also something we can do. We do have a nefesh elokis. So how is it that we can somehow overcome this natural state and touch a state that is also just as natural inside our godly soul, okay, but it's not as natural in terms of our animal soul, our conscious reality. In order that this mesiras nefesh, this bittul, this self-sacrifice, and again, not self-sacrifice physically, self-sacrifice conceptually, giving up our life for the Eibishter. That doesn't mean our life isn't enjoyable. It can be unbelievably enjoyable. Adarabah. One of the things the Eibishter wants is simcha. So that means you're also besimcha. But you're besimcha for what the Eibishter wants, and not for simcha for whatever it is that you happen to think is a good idea. Lachin b'deishin in mesiras nefesh yetzle begilui, it should be in a revealed way. Ba'ofen sheyeh kavua b'libay tamid mamish yemam v'layla lo yamish mizichreinei. The language of the Alter Rebbe. Okay, that's right. And stop in the middle. Let's go back and translate it. Ba'ofen, in a way, sheyeh kavua b'libay, it should be set in his heart. Tamid, always, mamish, not sort of. Yemam v'layla, day and night. Lo yamish mizichreinei. It won't disappear from his memory, meaning from his conscious reality. He'll never forget. How can I live there? And in Perek Chafei, the Rebbe is helping us understand how to be a Beinoni. Remember Mesiras Nefesh. How do you remember? What does it mean? If Chas v'Sholem v'Chas v'Sholem v'Chas v'Sholem, we were actually asked to give up our life for the Eibishter. So would we? Yeah, most people would. People would. I mean, if Chas v'Sholem push came to shove, people would. Baruch Hashem, it doesn't, but it's the history of the Jewish people. Okay, if I'm willing to give up my life for the Eibishter, so then I can certainly overcome the taiva for a particular action that is not in line with God's will. The taiva that I have right now that's not in line with God's will. Right? That mashal we brought when we were learning Basi Lagani. The Rebbe explains that the nature of a yid is he doesn't want to be separate from the Eibishter. So it's the mashal, Beryl and Shmerel, right? Quickly. It's a review. Beryl and Shmerel. I have to finish on time. I also want to say something before we finish. Beryl and Shmerel. They hate each other, can't stand each other. The very existence of the other one ruins the life of the Beryl's existence ruins Shmerel's life, and Shmerel's existence ruins Beryl's life. They go to shul, they sit at the opposite ends of the back of the shul, and all they can think about is that guy davening out of life. They can't stand each other. Right? They even might say negative things about each other, not just feel it, but say it. Okay. Issa deraisa, horrible, terrible. Completely opposite of God's will, their relationship to each other. Shmerel walks outside of the shul and there's a 19-year-old Soviet soldier with a gun. And he says, I'm looking for a guy named Beryl. Where is he? Ha ha! This is Shmerel's chance. Give Beryl to him. No more Beryl. Never have to deal with Beryl anymore. Is there a chance Shmerel's going to tell this heathen where Beryl is?
Absolutely.
Absolutely not. Not a chance. Right? The soldier hits Shmerel on the side of the head with the butt of his gun. His ear is bleeding. He's in the snow. He kicks him. Beats the living daylights out of him. Might even shoot him, God forbid, but we don't have to go that far. Is Shmerel going to tell this heathen where Beryl is? Not a chance. Because what does Shmerel know at that moment? If I do that, I'm completely disconnected from God and the Jewish people. I will never give another Jew to this guy. We don't do that. A little Lashon Hara? Well, that's okay. That's not a problem. God said don't do that. I mean, yeah, but he didn't really mean it, like he meant, most of the time. But when it comes to Beryl, it's a mitzvah deraisa to say, Lashon Hara, he's such a lowlife and such a creep and such a, I tell you what he did yesterday, Okay. So, what's the Alter Rebbe saying, Perek Chafei? What should Shmerel remember the next time he wants to say some Lashon Hara about Beryl? I'd be willing to give up my life for the Eibishter, not to do something against his will in certain circumstances. So how about this desire I have right now to let something roost in my head and come out of my mouth, a thought that God doesn't want and words that God doesn't want? Can I overcome that desire and not try to force myself not to think about it and certainly not say it? Can I do that in this moment? Well, if I'm willing to give up my life for the Eibishter, I can certainly put up with the discomfort of that I'm going to experience by not doing this Aveira for the next minute, 2, 3, 4. And don't worry, it's not going to last so long. It'll disappear because another one's going to come. So don't worry. There'll be another taiva for something else. Okay. That's Perek Chafei and Tani. All right. So that's the Mesiras Nefesh. The Jew has to have constantly in his head, wait a minute, a taiva floats into your head from your Nefesh Bahamis. I'd be willing to give up my life for the Eibishter. Certainly I can put up with the discomfort of not doing this thing that's bothering me right now. It's going to be a few minutes of discomfort. The Chassidus, the Mashpim describe the feeling, there's a deep word in Yiddish, it's called icky. It's just icky, not getting what you want. That's just icky. We like getting what we want. And if you tell me I can't have it, I feel icky for a few minutes, right? half a minute, 10 minutes, whatever it is. Can I put up with that? Well, wait a minute. If the Abishai asked me to give up my life, I give up my life. I can't put up with this. Okay. So where's that come from? Let's just quickly see this. You need a special empowerment. Where? Who gives you that? To Al Yedei Meisha. Where does that Nasinas Koyach come from? Who gives you the Koyach to have that level of Mesiras Nefesh constantly? That conscious awareness of your connection to the Eibishter and your lack of desire to break that connection. Who gives you the empowers you to be there? Meisha. That comes from Meisha. Ki Meisha in Yinabit. Because Meisha is the living expression of Bittul. V'nachnu ma. Meisha and Aaron say, Nachnu ma. We are what? Right? Okay, let's go. We'll go. I just want you to go a little further. I want you to see footnote 16, then we'll stop. And what I want to say, so we'll talk about it on Sunday. By virtue of the fact that Moshe commanded the generation that entered into Eretz Yisrael to accept upon themselves twice every day, Malchus Shemaim b'Mesiras Nefesh, the kingship of heaven, b'Mesiras Nefesh, with this self-sacrifice. Moshe commanded them to do that. Al Yedei Zeh, why did Moshe do that? Al Yedei Zeh niten lehem koyach. Moshe, by virtue of his commandment, was giving them the power. Lizkar, to remember Tomig, Indian Mesiras Nefesh Shalem. Their notion of Mesiras Nefesh. Wow. Now look at footnote 16, because the Rebbe says something here that's just astounding, and then we'll stop and we'll pick up Hashem Sunday morning. Al pi ma shekosu bifnim, based on that which was written bifnim. This is the Rebbe's footnote, right? It says, an edited minor. Yumtak loshen ad marzak. Yumtak means it's sweetened, but it means it's more fully understood. But that's the loshen always used. It's a beautiful loshen. Yumtak from matok. Loshen ad marzakin b'tanyisham. The Alter Rebbe uses a very interesting language when he discusses the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu commanded the Jewish people, dafka in the 40th year, the mitzvah of Kriya Shema, even though it seems pretty clear that we probably had that mitzvah already. Right? Okay. I mean, we're saying Kriya Shema. Was it written in our tefillin? It wasn't written in our tefillin. That's an interesting question. I guess it must have been written on a mezuzah, right? Because Korach said, well, do you need a mezuzah on your house if you have a library? Oh, interesting. I guess it was in the mezuzah. It's all rolled up, no one looked at it. So this is the language of the Alter Rebbe. There's so many extra words. And we know, Tanya is Torah Shebechsav. Tanya is the written Torah of Chassidus. For that reason, the Rebbe asked that no one should print the Tanya. I don't know, they might have done it by now, but I'm not sure. But the Rebbe asked that Tanya should not be written with nikudot. You don't put nikudot in Torah Shebechsav. You don't put nikudot in a Torah. Torah Shebal Peh? Well, I mean, almost every Mishnah is now printed with nikudot, and a lot of Gemaras are now printed with nikudot. But lots of Mishnayos were printed with nikudot for years and years. Right?
What about Chayinu?
What?
What about Chayinu nikudot?
Do they put nikudot in the Torah itself?
Oh.
No, in the actual text of Torah Shebechsav.
In the Chayinu book?
Yeah.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, actually, it's not a Torah mamish, but it's okay. It's actually in that sense not a Torah. I mean, some Chumashim, most Chumashim have it, right? I mean, any Tikkun Karim has it.
Yeah.
Right? You can't write it in the Sefer Torah.
For sure.
Right? Why not? Torah Shebechsav. Okay, so the Rebbe asked not to put Nikudot in Tanya. As far as I know, there's still no Tanya with Nikudot.
How come?
They do?
No, how come? What's the idea?
Because it's Torah Shebechsav, because it's the written Torah. In the written Torah, you don't put Nikudot. I mean, in the Torah scroll itself, you don't put Nikudot. When you print the Torah, you get a Chumash is not a Torah. It's not a Torah. It is the Torah, but it's not It's not a Torah you can lean out of. They now have for Balei Kara who haven't prepared, so they now have those plastic sheets that they impose on top of the Torah with the okay. It's got it.
Really?
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
kosher?
Well, I guess it's better than not pronouncing the words right. I don't know. I mean, I've seen it used. Okay, let's just look at this footnote and stop. Al pi ma shekos b'fnim yumtak loshen ad marzokim etan yisham lama tziva Moshe Rabbeinu alav v'shalom b'mishnah Torah. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu command in Mishnah Torah? This is the language of the Alter Rebbe. All these extra words. Lama tziva Moshe Rabbeinu alav v'shalom b'mishnah Torah l'dor shenichnasu la'aretz, etc., etc. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu alav v'shalom command in Mishnah Torah to the generation that entered the Aretz? At first glance, Havelei Lemar could have simply said, Lama nitztaveh hador shenichnasu la'aretz. Why were the generation that entered Eretz Yisrael commanded? Why do you have to say Moshe Rabbeinu commanded them? Just say that. Why were they commanded? Right? Why dafka this whole extra language? And dafka b'mishnah Torah, the Rebbe adds. The Alter Rebbe adds.
Rambam Mishnah Torah?
No, Mishnah Torah is Devarim. Devarim is called Mishnah Torah. Repetition of the Torah. So many things that are repeated. Interesting enough, it turns out Kriya Shema is one of them, even though it wasn't said the first time. How is it relevant that the commandment was by virtue of Moshe Rabbeinu? Why not just say they were commanded Kriya Shema? Because Mesiras Nefesh is important. Why does the Alter Rebbe say, why did Moshe Rabbeinu in Mishnah Torah command them? So the Rebbe explains all of the language in Tanya. Shatzivui nemar b'Mishnah Torah, and that the tzivui is mentioned in Mishnah Torah. Why does it have to mention Moshe, and why does it have to mention Devarim? Mishnah Torah. Based on what we just saw inside our mind, one can say in this the Alter Rebbe is hinting that the power to remember the Mesiras Nefesh that Shema Yisrael is all about, Humi Moshe, Dafka comes from Moshe. That's why the Alter Rebbe says Moshe commanded them. Why the Mishnah Torah? And in order to emphasize this even more, Meisif, the Alter Rebbe adds, b'Mishnah Torah, and he said it in Devarim, Dafka. Shemishnah Torah hu Moshe, Mishnah Amar Moshe. The Mishnah Torah Amar Moshe said, Lo yirak b'tor shaliach, not only as the shaliach of a Kadosh Baruch Hu telling the Yidden the words of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, Yadaber Shem El Moshe Lemar. That's not how Devarim works. How does Devarim work? Devarim is Moshe Rabbeinu's drasha to the Jewish people in the last 37 days of his life. Starts Rosh Chodesh Shvat and ends with Zayin Adar. And that's not esoteric. It says in the Torah that Moshe starts on the first day of the month Shvat. Because it's Shvat. It says the 11th month, which is Shvat. Why does it say b'Mishnah Torah? Mishnah Torah, Mishnah Torah Amar Moshe Leirak b'Tor Shaliach. He didn't say it as Shaliach. Elami Piatzmei. Moshe Rabbeinu was talking. Skip the brackets. The sources in Chazal where we see that. Hainu shezen nisatzem b'hasagaso. This has become one with Moshe Rabbeinu's understanding and conscious reality. So to speak, what's the source of this? Moshe. Why Dafka Moshe? Because Moshe is the source. Moshe is the one who gives the Yid the fighting chance to reach a state of Mesiras Nefesh. Why Dafka in Mishnah Torah? Because that's most powerfully the expression of Moshe, because Moshe is not simply the shaliach of the Eibishter saying over the Eibishter's words. Moshe is saying over his words to the Jewish people, which are so holy that they're part of the Torah, but they're still his words. And there's no difference between a word in Devarim and a word in the rest of the Torah. If a letter is missing, the whole Torah is possible. Unbelievable shot in the Alter Rebbe in time. Why does the Alter Rebbe add all these words? It's Torah Shebechsav. Torah Shebechsav is very exacting. Every word matters. Oh, exactly. Why Moshe Rabbeinu? That's the source of the Mesiras Nefesh. Why b'Mishnah Torah? Because that's Moshe Rabbeinu with a capital Mem and a capital Resh. That's the most powerful expression of Moshe Rabbeinu. That's where Mesiras Nefesh comes from, connection to Moshe. So Moshe is the one who connects us to that part of us, and we've seen this, we saw this in Vatat Tetzav, connects us to that part of us which is most powerfully connected to the Eibush. Okay, we'll pick up on Sunday.
Thank you very much.